up sports because you can't put any faith in any sports team. Eventually, they're going to fail you.
Yeah. Unless it's bad.
All right. Well, it's 12:35. I'm going to get us started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do this every Tuesday at 12:30. So glad you could join us today. Happy New Year! Such a wonderful time here in the new year, getting started, getting fresh. Going to get us kicked off with Mickey Tonos today to talk to us about meeting facilitation, something that we just really all need more instruction on meeting facilitation. I can recall back years ago, I learned a lot of things about meetings from different people. You know, Mickey, I think one of our mentors was Joe Patterson on meetings.
Absolutely.
And then I read a book called My American Journey by Colin Powell, and he talked a lot about meetings in there and keeping them brief and making sure that they were effective and getting to the point that you had for the meeting. And so I'm so happy to have Mickey here today to talk to us about that. So he's going to talk to us today about purposeful meeting facilitation, consensus without concession. I like the title there, Mickey. And so we'll get to that in just a moment. Before we do, I'm going to tell you about what's upcoming on CCN. So January 17th, we've got Ben Hudson here to talk to us about Century Health in a clinical setting. On January 24th, we're going to have our NAD collaboration. I don't think we know just yet exactly who that's going to be, but we are getting close. So we'll put that information out shortly. On January 31st, we've got Marissa Smith Fletcher with Empower Tennessee. She's going to talk to us about housing resources, very important topic for many of the people we serve out there. On February 7th, we've got our old friend Adrian O'Brien coming. Resources for adults not currently in services, very important topic. You know, as our department moves toward serving people who aren't necessarily in services, this is a key topic, I think, and something that we're going to move more into over the course of time. And then on February 14th, I won't be here on this day because I am getting a knee surgery on February 14th, but we will have Michelle Bagby and Babs are going to host on that date. And Catherine McLaughlin is going to be here to talk to us about sexuality education for self-advocates. I will be tuning into that at a later time and listening to the recording because that's such an important topic as well. So that's what we have upcoming on Clinical Consultation Network.
Cool.
So without further ado, I am going to introduce partially today's guest, Mickey Tonos. I've known Mickey, I think, for 28 years, 27 or 28 years, somewhere in that.
Not 20, around 22, 23 years.
When did you start in Tennessee?
95.
Well, that's when I started. So that's actually 27 years, Mickey.
27. Wow. Math isn't my strong suit. Unless I have Excel open and it does all the formulas for me.
It's amazing that we've had that long of a relationship. I remember when I was young, old people would talk about, oh yeah, I've known so and so for 30 years, and I'm like, oh my God, how did you know somebody for 30 years? That's amazing. And now I'm that guy. So
yeah.
Anyway, I'm proud to have known you for this span of time. We've had a lot of good times. We started out at team evaluation centers back in '95. We were both young and sprightly at the time, and it's been a great friendship. So I'm so happy you could be here today to talk to us again.
I appreciate the same.
You've been on. This is at least your third, maybe
fourth. I think
fourth time. Okay, so I'll get you one more. You're going to be in the 5 Timers Club, which is only for the elite.
Okay. People that got stuff that they want other people to listen to. So I guess I got to start with the interesting fact, right?
Yes, please do. Please do that.
I'm going to start with something no one really knows about me. In February 1999, I was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. I was in remission until 2010. In 2010, I started on Rebif. It's a self-injection 3 times a week, and it's an immunomodulator. Well, that lasted 4 years and then it failed. More lesions. So I went to Tysabri, which is a twice a year infusion, and did that for 4 years, and that failed when they found lesions on my brainstem. So they're like, this isn't working. So switched. So now we've been through 2. On the third one, get on Ocrevus, which is a major immunosuppressant during the pandemic, and it happened to have wiped out every SARS-CoV-2 antibody I had, regardless of regular cold or anything. So I talked to my doctor and said, we got to do something different. So we did. And now I'm on Mavenclad, which is a modified cancer drug. And you take a course of 5 pills 1 month, take course of 5 pills the next month, you wait a year, you do it again, that's it. So that's interesting fact is that I have been managing relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis since 1999. And whenever I talked to my doctor and I said, people don't know unless I tell them. He said, then keep doing what you're doing. So I am. That's
well, I was the comment I was going to make, Mickey, because I've known you since '99, and I knew that you had this diagnosis, but I never noticed any outward effects of that.
Yeah.
You've been able to maintain your work and do
Social
everything
life and everything. Yeah.
that you would typically do that I know of. But I'm sure it hasn't been quite that way personally, but yeah.
So the 2 points for that is this field is important, and the lives of other folks are important. And when I'm at work, my focus is them, not me. So I'm not running around everybody going, oh, guess what? Guess what? The other thing
Yeah.
is considering I am now on my 4th medication. If I'm telling you you're getting on my last nerve, I'm serious.
I'm going to try to not do that today.
You're good. You're good. I'll just bust out the flarp.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you for sharing that. That is a very interesting fact, and I applaud you for your persistence through
I'm
that.
sorry, I'm in the middle of a meeting. If it's
Easy.
too loud, I apologize, but
I'm sorry, what?
That was I think that was a little background. Somebody
okay.
somebody was unmuted temporarily,
Okay.
but I did want to tell you how much I appreciate you sharing that, and
Thank you.
that I admire your persistence through that over all these years, and no, it hasn't always been easy.
It depends on what your definition of easy. Like if sitting back and letting it go by, sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, but that's all you can do. So
Right.
I guess we're going to get kicked into the
Yeah, go
presentation.
ahead.
So Babs was just on the opening page. Purposeful meetings, part 2, consensus without concession. I'm going to define the terms real quick. Consensus really is when people truly agree with each other. Concession is when everybody in the room agrees with me. So I'm looking at this as terms of, are we empowering everybody, and or am I there on some ego trip and going to stay positioned as an expert to give answers for a problem I may not understand? So that's the introduction. We're looking at consensus rather than concession. So next page will be okay. This is just a recap of part 1. We're not going to go into structuring meetings, stuff like that. We're just going to talk about, as a participant, how you can build consensus as you participate. And regardless of your role as facilitator or just participant or whatever, this is a skill that helps everyone. So that's the purpose, is just extend that next page. You're going to make off-topic comments. I'm going to make off-topic comments. They're going to happen. That's not the purpose of your meeting discussion. Just let them fly. They're going to happen. Okay, so next page. Slight different from the first round. When you're building consensus, really talking about reflective practice, and also reflection as discussed by Carl Rogers and other folks. When what folks say to you is somehow repeated out of your mouth, and then they say yes, that's what we're looking at. And so as we're doing this, you're professionals, don't insist people use technical terms, use the colloquialisms, had a behavior, or whatever. As long as you know what you're talking about, you can move towards the specificity later. Let's not start arguments early on by mincing terms when people are really trying to get their positions out. And always ask if your responses make sense. Always. Because if you're reflecting back what other folks say to you in an attempt to validate what they're saying, then you owe it to yourself to request whether or not what you've said was validated or makes sense. It's typical conversations. That makes sense? That makes sense to you? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does make sense. And, I think so many clinicians probably have, and I'm pointing the finger at myself as I say this, we've launched into trying to make people understand our terminology for things when really what you're trying to do, going back to some of the other presentations we've had, your initial phase, you're trying to gather information, but you're also trying to build rapport with people.
Absolutely.
And you're gonna end up turning them off if you just launch right into your professional jargon.
Yeah. The twist on that is at times when I've gone into a group and been positioned as the expert, and then taken the role off of my shoulders of answering every question, and then inquiring more deeply into other people's experiences, and then coming up with something that I didn't expect I would come up with, in the language of the people that will be implementing it. All right, so we'll go to the next slide, kind of moving through this. All right, this is how you reiterate consensus. Just as within our early, whether you had counseling classes or in services and whatnot, you really want to reflect back to what people say to get validation. You want to validate what they're saying. When you're in the group and the discussion has been going, the task is not to just reflect, say what Dr. Davis said, but also what Dr. Davis and Donald and, for names, Adriana, say together. That's how you build consensus, because generally in situations, most of the folks doing the hard work kind of have an idea of what needs to be done. And as we come in as experts and tell them to do something else, they're in constant restart. So my point is reflect back what they're saying. And serendipitously, what happened to me is the more often I repeated back what people said, the newer ideas came to me, as I'm showing that I'm understanding. And as I'm asking if I'm being understood, just typical counseling stuff, the meeting moves along and people reach consensus pretty quickly. They're not coming to agreement about my idea, although there are times that has to happen. But in general, the ideas exist in the group, and to bring them forth, to empower them, to have them speak their mind, all that is good. What happens though is that you'll have experiential themes. So people will want to tell a story about an aggressive behavior or a crisis incident or whatnot. acknowledge those, but those aren't the topic of the discussion. Those are the things that inform your goals and objectives as you're moving towards this. So when participants talk about actionable things like, well, what I did last Friday, what happened Sunday, this worked, this didn't work, those kinds of things. That's the subject of the conversation, is what worked, what didn't work, their actions, not just the events of experiences. Those are great to know, but I've been in too many meetings where we've just talked about too many anecdotes and examples of the problem we're there to solve that we never get to solving the problem. Read step the answers in the group, and as you're reflecting back what persons say, and this is where it gets kind of difficult, depending on your experience and skills, but to take bits and pieces of what different people say and construct one coherent thought, theme, statement. It is a grand goal. Don't always get there, but if you are repeating back not only what one person says, but the summary of what multiple people have said, then you are building consensus. That is what consensus is. Let's see what next slide. What we got there? Yeah, and this is from the first one. These are useful phrases. This isn't philosophy. This is the behavior of building consensus and collaborating. I understand you. Has anyone had a similar experience? And that's how you bring other people to share their experiences and their actions. What works? What doesn't work? These are the other important questions and phrases. When? When does that happen? Does it happen every time? Help me understand. Please repeat that. That was a helpful comment. Thank you. And these are things that many times we get in these meetings, we just want to be a high powered and harumph. But if we're practicing clinicians that want to use our skills with the folks who need our help, then why are we not being supportive clinicians with each other in meetings? It's not always a debate, because the answer exists. We're just dancing around it, in my opinion, after doing this for 30,000 years.
If I understand correctly, Mickey, what you're trying to do is move people from debate to consensus to action steps.
Absolutely. And the task of doing that is in the reflecting and reiterating what people say. We're not getting into the, well, yeah, but what about, or you don't know. You'll get there. And everybody knows the limits of their skills, and they'll hand things off. Not every meeting's going to be perfect. Every meeting's going to be the kind of meeting it is. But all my life, I was given the impression that facilitating and participating in meetings was difficult. And then I started paying attention to what was actually said in meetings that left me feeling good about a meeting. So I just boiled it down to these phrases. And it turned out it was Carl Rogers, with a little touch of Skinner when you shape up what you want to hear. uh, so the next slide, more useful phrases, and these are available. There are things we cannot control. Admit that, be honest. And this goes into something I mentioned earlier in the previous session. If you're being asked to do something outside of your practice, your expertise, whatever, be honest. Be honest. Don't come up with some hokey little, game or some crazy intervention or process. Just say, I don't know. Let's see. I think
It took
that's
me a second to respond to your donuts example there, but you're referring to Michael Small's donut of responsibility, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, deep. This is all grounded in person-centeredness, um, the whole thing, and that's why I'm also advocating for reflection and reiteration in the meetings, because that's the most person-centered approach. If I'm showing that I am listening and understanding the other people in the room, there's nothing more person-centered than feeling understood and validated. And if we're going into meetings just to debate and prove we're the smartest, um, I'll give that presentation later on how you prove
That,
you're the smartest one in the room.
that donut had in the middle core responsibilities, and then in the next layer was education and creativity. And then
Yeah.
outside the donut were those things that were outside your responsibility, essentially.
Absolutely. 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 Let's see. So I think that's what's next. Okay. Yeah. This is how you know you are participating effectively in a meeting. Other participants will ask questions and make validating statements to each other. Most participants will have contributed at least once. These are outcome measures for your effective meeting. Um, most experienced participants expressed agreement, appreciation. So that means you're building consensus rather than simple agreement or negotiating or all that. The meeting will end on time. It will. It will, because you're not wasting time on stories you don't need to repeat. Um, and like Bruce mentioned earlier, if the meeting wraps up with next steps, action steps, goals, purpose achieved, and then on the last one, um, you can use selective attention and responsive. We call that discriminative reinforcement. If someone is in the meeting that's always going, well, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, you don't have to respond to every detraction. And uh, quality facilitation is not distracted. You help bring people back to the point. Um, and quite honestly, they're it's just going to happen. Like I said, the first slide, you're not going to prevent everybody from saying stuff to ruin your meeting. But these are your outcome measures. And then final, just some suggested reading and all that. So this is in a nutshell. And my purpose was to demystify consensus building. We talk about it a lot. There's a lot of lip service in professional and trade journals about it, but no one tells you what behavior builds consensus. Well, that's where I'm stuck. I'm a behaviorist, and so if someone says we're going to, reach agreement, I want to know what agreement looks like, what it sounds like. And that's why I'm doing this, is to put in some of the early building blocks of how you can set up situations where you can recognize agreement, recognize consensus, and things like that. So that was it in a nutshell. I promised folks I would run this quick, and I'm not going to ramble for 3 hours.
Well, you weren't going to do that anyway because we're only on here for an hour. But I do have a couple of questions about this because, you do go into meetings and sometimes people do have opposing views on how something should be approached or how to deal with something. In your experience, what are ways to bring people toward that consensus? I mean, what do you try to focus on to help people get to a point where at least maybe we can figure out something we can try?
Yeah. The big point is it depends on the purpose of the meeting. If it's, just an administrative meeting or you're writing policy and their guidelines and stuff, then you've got to follow that. But in a clinical meeting, um, which is my most relevant experience, people come in worried, scared, upset, um, frustrated, fed up, um, and I know these going in there. So my approach isn't to let people vent that for the entire time I'm there, but to put it out there and be acknowledged and move on. So, in well, I guess to your experience, Bruce, one time I had to go to an agency to do some staff training, and the DSP met me in the training room when he pulled a big knife out of his pocket and started cleaning his fingernails. Like, what you got to tell me? And I was like, well, this isn't going to go well. This is not going to go well. Now, what we did though was eventually had another staff member or two together, and then we all talked together about what works, what doesn't work. And Bruce, I think that's it. If your pivot points are the simple things, what works, and the behavioral question I would ask is like, well, how do you do that? How? That's how you bring it back. So if someone's wanting to do power play and they've got a big intervention, just ask them how. How are we going to do that? And it may be a great idea, but the how it gets implemented is really got to be sensitive to the competencies, capabilities, and opportunities, DSPs and parents and whatnot. So you got to defuse a little bit, but once again, it depends on the kind of meeting. If it's a problem-solving meeting, everybody's there wanting to solve a problem. If it's a policy meeting, people are just there to put words on paper sometimes. I guess. Does that answer?
Yeah,
That get
yeah,
at
I
it?
think so. A couple things I think about are so there are. I think of like in Joe Patterson's model as an example. One of the things that you do because he talks about so in the follow-up sessions you've got accomplishments. What accomplishments have you made since the last time that we met? And so if you're going to list things like, okay, I've made progress on getting a job. I went out and investigated several places to get a job. And then you got what works and doesn't work. So strategies that are helpful and not helpful. And then the thing that ties the meeting together is the next step. So in other words, we can have all kinds of disagreements here, but let's try to come together on what we're going to establish. And you mentioned this in your presentation here. What are we going to try to accomplish between now and the next time that we meet?
Yeah.
And so you've got a next step that has who's going to do it, what they're going to do, and by when they're going to have that done. To me, that's a consensus builder in a way, because we may not be able to agree on everything, but we can agree on, okay, from this point, with everything we've discussed, what are we going to try to do
Yeah.
between now
Yeah.
next time?
And then after that, it's true reflective practice. You try something and fix it if it doesn't work. Try something and repeat it if it does. It's that kind of thing. One thing
Yeah.
that Joe impressed upon me was when we're talking about things. He said, make it a picture. Draw a picture. How does this look? And it could be flow chart or it could be cartoon, whatever. But it's like just a bunch of words that show me, and then looking at that um, from that perspective, and also taking what Bill Lingles said. Uh, what are we going to do tonight after your training? What are we doing tonight? Um, Very important, and it brings things down from the erudition of the academic life and the scope of everything I can possibly talk about to what do these people need tonight and that's it. And so when we're talking about these meetings, I'm really talking about the clinical context. um, Although within the feedback I've gotten from participants and other ones, using the reflective practice or Rogerian reflection or whatever you want to call it in any kind of staff meeting led to a better meeting. Period. So if we can have a better meeting, period, that's a step, and I'm good with that.
Yeah, I'm just curious to your response to this, because I feel like one of the main factors that we have on, for bringing people together in a discussion is the whole idea of person centeredness. Because so often I am recalling, and when I did the presentation a couple weeks ago here for the Christmas season, I talked about this concept of self-hugging that Stephen Reese brings in all the time, because we all have our different perspectives on things. I mean, Don Redden's on here. He's an agency administrator. I'm a clinician. There are other clinicians. There are independent support coordinators. There, and everybody's got a little bit different vantage point on an issue. The person themselves has a different vantage point than everybody else. And it seems to me, and I'm interested in your response to this, Mickey, that a large part of the reason we talk about person-centered planning so much is to give us a common understanding of things. I mean, so in other words, we can have these different vantage points, but our aim really is to be here to help this person that we're with.
Exactly.
And that's a big consensus builder in some way.
Yeah, and that you're exactly right. And my point is, to get there, this is how we participate in meetings. So we've got all the struggles and contingencies and circumstances going on, and we're not going to be able to fix them all in a situation. But for me, I'm going to reflect back on one of my earlier presentations on transitional objects. When I walked into that meeting, I had no idea what I was going to do. No idea. Even though I looked over the person's ISP, great guy. Looked over records, no serious incident, just great. But listening to mom and the van driver and the DSPs and the agency, and then asking questions about things they said, and then reflecting back, you can see expressions. People are like, oh. And if you're watching your co-participants, the more people go, then you've got a good clue that you can kind of condense multiple person statements into a coherent thought. But that if you're not paying attention to your co-participants, you're not building consensus. And I don't know what you're doing, but that's the point. You look for agreement not only in words, but also in actions and facial expressions, gestures, whatnot, and build on that. That's the basic behavioral premises. You build on success. And whether you're, a counselor or an ISP or whatnot, we're looking for successful, productive, pleasant meetings so we can get our jobs done. And we want consensus. We want agreement. We want collaboration. And my point, and Bruce pointed that out, is that I'm talking about participating in meetings in a person-centered way. I'm not coming in with a sociological theory of human behavior that I'm going to press upon everybody. I want to know how to help this person be happy and how to stop ruining this person's day. And those are simple questions, simple questions. And we need to show we listen to folks. Anybody else? I feel like I'm.
Yeah, I want to encourage anybody who has any comments or questions. I'm particularly interested in, different ways people may have handled contentious meetings. One of the things I've noticed over the course of my career, Mickey, a lot of times there have been meetings that I had to go to that I really dreaded. Because I knew this was going to be such a it's just everybody's going to be in disagreement about things, and there's so much going on here. There's a lot of problems
going to
been
be
happening
there.
as a result of things that have been going on, and then I'm so nervous about it. It's interesting to me though that in those circumstances, almost all of those meetings go well. I don't know why that ends up happening, because I've thought about it and I've obsessed over it for weeks, and I don't think that contributes to this why it goes well. It's just, I'm so anxious about it, but I don't know whether maybe it does help me focus a little bit more on how can I make this go well, because I think it's going to go so poorly. But I wonder when you're entering a contentious meeting like that, though, how do you think that it's best to approach it? I mean, what are some of the factors you might think about to address, what you're anticipating as being miserable?
Well, first of all, I don't put it on my shoulders to fix everybody's behavior in the meeting. So if somebody is super contentious and I'm invited to the meeting, I'm likely just to listen until the person says something reasonable and calmly, and then as a behavior analyst, I would reinforce that. um, but any other kinds of strife and struggle, giving examples of going down to an agency and doing person-centered planning for months. And then one of the agency directors said, I don't know why you come down here. This person is an ICF. We don't have to do any of this. And I was like, okay, bye. I mean, what do you do? And that was pretty contentious. And sometimes the well, let's put it this way: the one that says no always wins. If you just say no, okay. So not all are successful. There have been meetings, where there was heated discussion between myself and someone else, and then what always happened was that once we went past the heat and someone said, well, do you know this? And they go, oh, I did not know that. It's like this one time back when I was the only behavior analyst for all of East Tennessee, regional office and outside. Um, this one person was asking me why I'm not going to his agency all the time. And he said, you told me once it's too far to go. And I was like, what was it? Well, it turns out he was asking for an appointment in Harriman at the same time I was going to be in Johnson City. And so it was within that day. And so when he understood that, excuse me, that all of East Tennessee and not just Knox, Anderson, and Roane County,
Right.
and then, excuse me, when I understood that what I'd been giving him wasn't good enough, you know, to carry
Yeah.
in that absence, we
You know,
worked out.
yeah. It is amazing, though, looking back, how you, me, and Celeste, and let's see, Andrew and Jay handled this whole state
And
at one time
Sam
in the
Carney,
community, at least.
and
Oh, and Sam Carney, right? Sam Carney. Yep,
that's my best.
those were the good old days. It's amazing we were able to do that when now we've got a whole lot of other people out here, but we weren't doing it nearly as well as we're doing it now. So
Speak for yourself.
well, okay, I will. But, well, now I'm interested to know this also, Nikki.
Yeah.
Like keeping meetings to a time frame. I'm just interested in what your advice there is. Sometimes I have gone into meetings with the best laid plan of getting it done within an hour. Our commissioner actually has a principle that he likes to employ called end with 10. So if you start a meeting for an hour, if you have a meeting for an hour, that you want to end with 10 minutes left over, or at least to strive for 5 minutes left over. But that's challenging sometimes. I'm just curious if you have any ideas about how you can move this along and how you can get it, make sure that you're coming close to your time frame that you've set for the meeting.
When I'm facilitating a meeting, I'm going to close the meeting when I come up with a good, actionable plan, even if it's a step, so that we can say, okay, we're going to try this tomorrow, and then close that there. Because then, if you get into the excuse me, what if, what about, what if, you're never going to end the meeting. So my point is to find someone like, okay, so we're going to try this tomorrow, and get people to agree about when they're going to start. You've got an action step. already. So let's get the agreement about starting. And the sooner you can get that start date, like if you're going to start tomorrow, then you can end the meeting right away. But I think a lot of it, Bruce, is really just staying focused on the point, keeping the members focused on the point, and also making sure your topic can be handled in the time you have. It's only taken me 27 years to figure out. I can figure out.
Yeah,
Some,
I'm still figuring it out.
yeah, I can figure some things out in an hour. It's also confirmed that it's going to take me weeks to figure other things out. So you got to plan your steps, and none of the outcomes of the meeting are prescriptive. What I'm talking about specifically is that how we are to participate in meetings to make them effective. Everybody's got the rules and regulations of start on time, end on time, and all that. But what do you do in the meantime? And that's what I'm talking about.
Here's a maybe a little bit of a clarifying question about that, because sometimes you don't want to confront people about the circular reasoning. So I've had this happen before where, okay, somebody makes a point, somebody makes a counterpoint, and then it's sort of a cycle of continual counterpoints back and forth. And it's extending the meeting because we're basically repeating ourselves over and over. And so you've got, as the facilitator, you have to be a little bit assertive to break through that, it seems.
Yeah. What I've done in the past, because if it's an impasse, you and it's going to like that, you just say, I see we disagree. And then what I've done is then fallen back to the more recent points in which people agreed, or move it towards to, we agreed here, so how are we going to do it? And this contentious of, well, what about, what if? My point has been, we'll deal with that if it happens. Not everybody takes that approach, and I respect that. Some folks want to cover every caveat and circumstance, and I say good luck, and call me back next week, and we'll see. So yeah, what I do is I don't let the argument fester, but I try to bring it back to point. And just agree, well, let's agree to disagree. But what can we do? We agreed we can do this. And then as long as the discussion is about we agreed, then using that phrase over and over again just really kind of builds the motivation, helps people feel like they're part of the team, because they are part of the team. You're not fooling them. And if people are disagreeing, they disagreed before the meeting, they're going to disagree after the meeting, and they're going to keep disagreeing over lunch or whatever. I'm not going to take care of every problem in a meeting. Some things, just get it back on topic. Let's get back on topic. That's the way I've done it. I've not seen anyone else do that. So
that's good stuff, Mickey. I appreciate it so much. I don't think we have any comments or questions at this point, but if you have any comments or questions at any point, you could always email Mickey, Michael.Tonos.
No, Mickey.
Mickey.Tonos at tn.gov. And Mickey, I appreciate so much you coming on and talking to us about meeting facilitation today. That's been a great, great presentation.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to keep keeping it to less than an hour of ramble.
We're going to end with 10 today. I'm very proud of us for doing that. And I appreciate all of our audience. Thank you for being here today. We'll see you again next week on the Clinical Consultation Network. We do it every Tuesday at 12:30. See you then.
Thanks. See y'all.
So long.